The morning they came to tear down Marcus Dellwood's wall, the temperature in Creston Falls, Tennessee was 31 degrees and dropping. Frost on the grass, ice on the windshields, the kind of still, gray November morning where sound carries farther than it should. And in the middle of all that quiet, a convoy. 4 vehicles from the Harlan County Sheriff's Department, 2 black SUVs from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, a flatbed truck carrying a Caterpillar D6 bulldozer, its engine idling low and patient like something that had been waiting a long time for this exact moment. And standing on his front porch, holding a white ceramic mug of black coffee, wearing a faded army green barn jacket and work boots, was Master Sergeant Raymond Earl Tuck, retired United States Army Special Forces. He didn't wave, he didn't shout, he didn't even smile. He just watched. Because men like Raymond Tuck don't celebrate, they finish. Let me tell you about Creston Falls. It sits in the hill country east of Knoxville, one of those Tennessee towns that doesn't appear on most maps but shows up in the hearts of the people who have lived there their whole lives. Population, about 4,000, 1 diner, 1 hardware store, a volunteer fire department that doubles as the social hub of the county every Friday night. Pinecroft Road runs along the western edge of town, following the curve of the Crest Creek before climbing a gentle ridge where the lots open up and the trees get serious. White pines mostly, some old-growth oak. In the fall of 2019, there were 11 houses on Pinecroft Road, each one separated by a comfortable stretch of land, not wealthy, not poor, just honest American property, the kind where a man could sit on his back porch and hear the creek and maybe a woodpecker and nothing else. Raymond Tuck had lived at 14 Pinecroft Road for 22 years. The house was a white clapboard colonial with a flagstone walkway and a wraparound porch. The lawn was cut with military precision every Thursday morning. In summer, there were black-eyed Susans along the front fence, planted there by Raymond's wife, Caroline, before the cancer took her in 2014. He hadn't moved them. He watered them every season like she was watching. The back of Raymond's property stretched down toward the creek. A full acre and a half of Tennessee hill country land, including a strip of wooded buffer that ran along the eastern boundary line, 32 feet wide, marked by 4 iron survey stakes that had been sitting in that ground since 1971. Nobody paid much attention to those stakes until Marcus Dellwood arrived. Raymond Earl Tuck was 67 years old in the fall of 2019. He'd enlisted in the United States Army in June of 1974, fresh out of Harlan County High School at 18, skinny and serious with dark eyes and the kind of quiet that made his drill sergeant either suspicious or nervous, usually both. By 1979, he'd passed selection for Special Forces. By 1983, he wore the Green Beret. He served 26 years, 2 tours in Central America during the Reagan years, things he still doesn't talk about. Desert Storm in 1991, attached to a classified intelligence element out of Fort Bragg. A rotation to Bosnia in 1996. And then the long, slow wind-down training exercises, language schools, a final posting as senior advisor to a Special Forces group before he quietly hung up his uniform in the summer of 2000. He came back to Creston Falls because it was where Caroline was. She'd waited for him through 3 overseas deployments and 2 undisclosed ones and never once made him feel guilty about it. When he retired, they bought the house on Pinecroft Road together, fixed it up piece by piece, planted the black-eyed Susans. She died 5 years later. Raymond stayed. You'd find him most mornings in the woodshop he'd built behind the garage, a proper shop 12 by 20 with a lathe and a jointer and a bandsaw he'd bought second-hand from a retiring cabinet maker in Knoxville. He made furniture, chairs mostly, heavy-jointed, the kind that would still be holding somebody's grandchild in 100 years. He gave most of it away to a church in town, to neighbors who needed a kitchen table, to the VFW hall down on Route 9. He coached youth baseball in the spring, drove Miss Eunice Hartley to her dialysis appointments on Tuesdays because she had no one else, served on the board of the Creston Falls Veterans Memorial Fund. He had a limp in his left knee, shrapnel from a training accident in 1989 that the Army doctors had done their best with and then declared good enough. On cold mornings, it was worse. On this particular November morning, it was bad. He walked with it the way he walked with everything, steadily, without complaint. There was one other thing about Raymond Tuck that mattered. Before he retired in his final posting at Fort Bragg, He'd spent 4 years working in the Judge Advocate General's Corps as a senior legal liaison, helping Special Forces teams navigate land use disputes, property seizures, and jurisdictional conflicts in foreign operating areas. He wasn't a lawyer, but he understood land law the way a surgeon understands bone. He knew survey documents, chain of title, easements, encroachments. He knew, in particular, exactly what a boundary survey from 1971 could do to a man who'd built a $2 million wall in the wrong place. He'd known it for a while. He'd been patient. Marcus Dellwood pulled onto Pinecroft Road on a Saturday morning in early May of 2019, behind the wheel of a pearl-white 2020 Range Rover Sport, followed by a moving truck the size of a small aircraft carrier and a silver Tesla Model X that belonged to his wife, Brittany. The property he'd purchased was Lot 12, the large parcel directly adjacent to Raymond's eastern boundary line. It had sat empty for 3 years after the previous owner, Old Pete Garrison, passed without heirs. The county had sold it at auction in March. Marcus Dellwood had paid $387,000 for it. Marcus was 41. He made his money in property development, specifically in what he called luxury residential reimaging, which is a real estate term for buying land in small towns near mountains or water, building large structures on it, and then selling them to people from Nashville or Atlanta who wanted to feel rustic on weekends. He had a firm in Knoxville called Dellwood Signature Developments. He had a verified Instagram account with 84,000 followers. He wore Patagonia fleece and Lululemon pants and had the confident, permanent half-smile of a man who believed that being right was the same thing as being successful. His first conversation with Raymond Tuck happened the weekend he moved in. Marcus was standing in his new backyard, gesturing grandly at the tree line with his phone out, clearly on a video call, walking the property for someone's benefit. He crossed the eastern fence line, the old wooden one Pete Garrison had put up years ago, without slowing down. Raymond was on his porch. "Morning," Raymond said. Marcus looked over, held up one finger, kept talking into his phone for another 45 seconds, then lowered it. "Hey, you're the neighbor, right? Look, I'm going to be doing some construction back here starting next month. Might be noisy, just a heads up." Raymond set down his coffee mug. "What kind of construction?" "Privacy wall, 12-foot architectural concrete, running the full length of the back property. It'll look great, actually, it'll probably raise your value too." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who assumed everyone around him was waiting to be impressed. "You'll want to make sure you've got your survey right before you build," Raymond said. Marcus laughed, one short syllable. "Yeah, my guys handle all that, we're good." He turned and walked back toward his house. Raymond picked up his coffee. "You see, folks, there it was, the first crack, the first sign." He'd said, "My guys handle all that." Raymond Tuck had spent 26 years in the Special Forces. He knew exactly what it meant when a man delegated the details. It meant nobody was checking the details. Construction began on June 3, 2019. Raymond stood at his kitchen window that morning and watched the crew arrive, 8 men, a concrete mixer, and a string line that somebody had staked out along what they believed to be the eastern property boundary. He watched where they drove the first stake. He walked back to his woodshop. He opened the fireproof lockbox he kept on the top shelf of the metal cabinet beside the bandsaw. He took out a manila folder, the one he'd requested from the Harlan County Register of Deeds back in April, the week after he'd learned the property next door had sold. Inside the folder was a photocopy of the original 1971 boundary survey for 14 Pinecroft Road, conducted by licensed surveyor Thomas H. Briggs of Briggs Land and Title, Knoxville, Tennessee. He looked at it for a moment. He put it back, he put the folder back, he closed the lockbox. Then he walked next door. Marcus answered the door in athletic shorts and a Vanderbilt Law golf shirt. He had a Bloody Mary in his hand at 9 in the morning, which Raymond noted without comment. "Your crew is about to pour footings," Raymond said, "about 4 feet inside my property line." Marcus blinked. "That's not possible. My guys surveyed this." "They surveyed it from the old fence line. The old fence line isn't the boundary." The boundary is 32 feet east of that fence, going by the 1971 survey, which is the document of record at the Harlan County Register of Deeds. That puts your construction on my land." Marcus's smile didn't change, but his eyes did. "Look," he said, "I'm sure there's some old paperwork that needs to be reconciled. I'll have my attorney look at it, but we're on a schedule, so." "I'd like you to stop your crew until it's reconciled," Raymond said. "I hear you, I'll make some calls." He looked at Raymond the way men look at things that are inconvenient but not actually threatening. "You're what, Vietnam? You guys are all about the property lines, aren't you?" He smiled. Raymond looked at him for 3 full seconds. "Desert Storm," Raymond said, "and yes, I am." He walked back home. The crew kept working. "Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever tried to be reasonable with someone who had no interest in being reasonable? Have you ever stood there, said the right words, stayed calm, held out your hand, and watched someone look right through you? Drop a comment below and tell me what happened. Because every single person watching this has felt that exact thing, and you know how it ends." Raymond went back to his woodshop. He opened a spiral notebook, green cover, the kind they sell at the dollar store, and he wrote, June 3, 2019, informed M. Dellwood of boundary discrepancy. Construction continued. Times 9:14 a.m. Then he picked up a chisel and went back to work on a rocking chair he was building for the VFW hall. Over the next 4 months, Marcus Dellwood built his wall. It went up section by section through the Tennessee summer, 12 feet of reinforced architectural concrete, poured and formed and sealed, running 310 feet along what Marcus believed was his property line. It cost, according to the contractor's invoice that would later become Exhibit C in Harlan County Circuit Court Case No. 2020 CV1147, precisely $2.1 million. It sat every inch of it on Raymond Tuck's land. But Raymond didn't call a lawyer yet. He did 3 things. First, he ordered a fresh survey. He hired Caldwell & Sons Land Survey out of Knoxville, licensed, certified, bonded, and on July 19, 2019, their crew spent a full day on Pinecroft Road. Their findings matched the 1971 document exactly. The true boundary was 31.7 feet east of the old fence line. The wall was built entirely within that strip. He paid for the survey, he filed it with the county, he kept a copy in the lockbox. Second, he mounted cameras. 4 of them, Realink 4K units covering every angle of his property line, the road frontage, and his driveway. Weatherproof, motion activated, recording to a local NAS drive in his basement. He'd been thinking about cameras for a while. This seemed like a good time. Third, he called his friend. Colonel James Jimmy Wharton, retired U.S. Army JAG Corps, had served alongside Raymond in a training command at Fort Bragg from 1995 to 1998. He was now a senior partner at Wharton Lee & Associates in Nashville, specializing in property litigation and civil rights law. He had argued twice before the Tennessee Supreme Court. He had a win rate that his associates talked about the way baseball fans talk about batting averages. Raymond explained the situation in about 4 minutes. Jimmy listened. "You've got the 1971 survey?" Jimmy asked. "Sitting right here." "And you've got the fresh one?" "Filed with the county last week." There was a pause. "Raymond," Jimmy said, "do you understand what you have?" "I believe so." "Adverse possession doesn't apply because you never abandoned the claim. The fence wasn't a concession. Pete Garrison put it up as a courtesy, not a boundary marker. The 1971 survey is the governing document. Every inch of that wall is on your property." "That's what I thought. You could have stopped it in June." "I know." Another pause. "You waited on purpose," Jimmy said. Raymond didn't answer. "You let him finish the whole wall." "He seemed determined," Raymond said. "I didn't want to interrupt." "Now here's where I need you to really pay attention, because while Raymond was being patient, Marcus Dellwood was doing what arrogant men do when they sense someone might actually push back. He escalated. In August, a pile of construction debris, concrete chunks, rebar scraps, plastic sheeting appeared against Raymond's back fence on Raymond's side, dumped there overnight. Raymond photographed it, logged it, left it there. In September, Marcus filed a complaint with the Creston Falls HOA claiming Raymond's woodshop violated the community's noise ordinance. The HOA sent a letter. Raymond sent back a copy of the county's approved building permit for the shop, dated 2003, along with a noise decibel reading from a certified environmental firm showing the shop produced 58 decibels, well within the residential limit. The HOA closed the complaint. Marcus filed another one, this time claiming Raymond's flagpole, a 25-foot aluminum pole flying the American flag and the Special Forces crest, exceeded the HOA's height restriction. Raymond sent back the federal flag code, 2 relevant Tennessee statutes protecting the display of the American flag, and a polite note pointing out that the HOA's own CC and RS explicitly exempted flagpoles displaying the national colors. The HOA closed that complaint too. And then in October, something happened that changed everything. Raymond came home from his Tuesday drive with Miss Eunice Hartley at around 4 p.m. on October 14, 2019. It was raining, a cold, steady October rain that had been falling since mid-morning, turning the leaves on Pinecroft Road into a copper-andrust carpet on the asphalt. He pulled into his driveway and walked through the side gate to check on the backyard, the way he always did. The black-eyed Susans were gone. Not trampled, not wilted. Gone. The whole bed along the front fence, the one Caroline had planted the spring before she got sick, the one Raymond had watered every year since, the one that bloomed yellow every June and made the whole front of the house look like it was celebrating, was nothing but a strip of raw, brown soil. A Dellwood Signature Developments mini excavator was parked on the street, its bucket still wet with Tennessee mud. Raymond stood there in the rain. The camera footage, which he reviewed that evening, showed the excavator operator swinging the machine's bucket across the fence line at 11:47 a.m. Whether it was deliberate or careless, the result was the same. 16 years of Caroline's garden, gone in about 40 seconds. Raymond stood in his kitchen and watched the footage 3 times. He closed the laptop. He sat down in the wooden chair by the window, one of his own chairs, a ladder back with hand-cut mortise joints, and he was quiet for a long time. He did not go next door. He did not call the police. He picked up his phone and sent one text to Jimmy Wharton. It said, "I'm ready. Now let me tell you something about men like Raymond Tuck, men who have spent years operating in environments where losing your composure doesn't just cost you dignity, it costs people their lives. Those men learn a discipline that most of us will never understand. They learn that anger is a resource, and like any resource, ammunition, water, fuel, you don't spend it until the moment is exactly right." Raymond had just decided the moment was exactly right. If you think that was the end, you've never met a man like Raymond Tuck. Here's what nobody knew at the time. Well, nobody except Raymond. When he'd first heard that Lot 12 was going up for auction in early 2019, he hadn't just requested the 1971 survey from the county records office. He'd done what any man trained in military intelligence does. He'd pulled the full picture. He'd obtained Marcus Dellwood's complete business history, Secretary of State filings, UCC liens, contractor licensing records, and the civil court docket for Knox County, where Dellwood Signature Developments had been sued 4 times in 7 years, twice by subcontractors, once by a homeowners association in Sevierville, and once by a former business partner named Dale Pruitt, who alleged that Marcus had defrauded him of a $340,000 equity stake. The Pruitt case had been settled for an undisclosed amount, which is lawyer speak for Marcus paid to make it go away. But that wasn't the key piece. The key piece was this. In the spring of 2019, while Raymond was watching Marcus break ground, the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance had opened a quiet investigation into Dellwood Signature Developments for contractor licensing violations and improper use of investor funds on a development project in Blount County, a project called Ridgemont Estates, where 11 families had paid deposits for custom homes that had never been built. Raymond knew about this because his nephew, Kyle Tuck, was an investigator with the Tennessee Department of Commerce. Kyle hadn't told him in any official capacity. He'd mentioned it at Thanksgiving, offhand, the way you mention things to family. Raymond had filed it away the way he filed everything, carefully, patiently. And now Jimmy Wharton was on the phone with the Tennessee AG's Civil Division and the Harlan County DA's office, and Raymond was at his kitchen table with every document in the lockbox arranged in neat stacks on the surface. The 1971 survey, Thomas H. Briggs signed and stamped. The 2019 Caldwell survey confirming the boundary, matching the 1971 document to within 2 inches. 8 photographs of the construction debris dumped on his property. The HOA complaint filings and Raymond's documented responses. 41 photographs of the destroyed flower bed. 3 months of continuous 4K camera footage covering every relevant inch of Pinecroft Road. And 1 invoice obtained via public records request showing Dellwood's signature developments had billed a Marcus Dellwood Personal LLC, Creston Falls Holdings, $2.1 million for the construction of a concrete wall on someone else's land. Jimmy filed the civil suit on November 4, 2019. Tuck v. Dellwood, Harlan County Circuit Court. Causes of action: trespass to land, conversion of real property, intentional destruction of personal property, nuisance, and tortious interference with quiet enjoyment. Damages sought: $2.1 million for the unlawful construction structure, $85,000 for the value of the destroyed garden and historical landscaping, $140,000 in attorney's fees and survey costs, and $500,000 in punitive damages. Total $2,825,000. Jimmy also, on the same day, forwarded a copy of the complaint, along with the contractor licensing and investor fund documentation, to the Tennessee Department of Commerce, who forwarded it to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And that's when everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, November 19, 2019. The temperature had been dropping since before dawn, and by 7 a.m. there was a skin of ice on the Crest Creek and frost on every grass blade on Pinecroft Road. The sky was that flat, white Tennessee gray that means winter has stopped deciding and started arriving. Raymond was up at 5:30. He made coffee, black, 2 cups, the way he'd made it since 1974, and he sat at his kitchen table. He wasn't nervous. He was the way he'd been on operational mornings, still, settled, present. At 7:45, he heard the first vehicle. He put on his barn jacket, the old army green one, worn soft at the elbows, and his work boots, and he walked out onto his front porch with his second mug, and he stood there. The convoy came up Pinecroft Road in order. First, a Harlan County Sheriff's cruiser, then a second one, then a black Ford Expedition from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, followed by a second expedition, then a flatbed truck with the Caterpillar D6 riding it like a patient, inevitable machine, then bringing up the rear, a white panel van with the logo of Caldwell and Sons Land Survey. They parked in a line along the road in front of Marcus Dellwood's property. Doors opened, radios crackled. A deputy unfolded a large orange construction barrier and placed it at the foot of Marcus's driveway. At 7:53, Marcus Dellwood's front door opened. He came out in a gray Patagonia robe and fleece-lined Ugg slippers, holding a white ceramic tumbler of what was probably a latte. His hair was unbrushed. He looked at the convoy the way a man looks at something his brain is refusing to process. A Harlan County deputy walked up his front path with an envelope. "Mr. Dellwood, Marcus Allen Dellwood." "Yeah, what is this?" "You're being served with a civil judgment order and a county abatement warrant, sir. I'll need your signature acknowledging receipt." What judgments? We haven't even had a hearing." The Honorable Circuit Court Judge Sandra Voss issued an emergency injunctive relief order on Friday, Mr. Dellwood. The order authorizes the county to remove the encroaching structure at 14 Pinecroft Road, the concrete wall built on the plaintiff's property, at the defendant's expense. Marcus stared at the envelope. "The TBI agents are here in connection with a separate matter," the deputy added helpfully. The 2 TBI agents were already walking around the side of Marcus's house. Marcus's wife, Brittany, appeared in the doorway behind him in a silk robe, holding a phone to her chest. "Marcus, what's happening?" "I don't." He looked at the envelope, he looked at the flatbed, he looked down the street. And there was Raymond Tuck, standing on his porch, mug in hand, not watching the commotion, not gloating, just standing there the way he stood every morning, steady and unhurried, a man at home in his own skin on his own land, drinking his coffee while the world rearranged itself around him. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Raymond took a sip. "Now let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever seen justice actually arrive? Not on TV, not in a movie, but in real life, on a real street, on a real cold morning. It looks quieter than you'd expect, and louder at the same time. Drop a comment and tell me what justice looked like in your life, big or small." The Caterpillar D6 came off the flatbed at 8:14 a.m. The Caldwell surveyors staked the true boundary line, red flags every 8 feet along the 31.7-foot strip, while the operators positioned the machine. By 9:00 a.m., the first section of Marcus Dellwood's $2.1 million architectural concrete wall had been reduced to rubble. It took 4 hours. The TBI investigation, which is what the 2 agents in the backyard were about, was related to the Blount County development fraud. 6 of the 11 families who'd paid deposits for homes at Ridgemont Estates had filed formal complaints, and the paper trail from Dellwood's signature developments showed investor funds redirected to Marcus's personal LLC for the Pinecroft Road wall construction. The investigation would take another 7 months. But on that gray November morning, what the neighbors of Pinecroft Road saw was simpler. They came out of their houses one by one, Eunice Hartley in her coat and slippers, the Garza family from number 9, Pete Morrison from number 6, who'd had his own disputes with Dellwood over a shared drainage ditch. They stood on their lawns and they watched. Nobody cheered. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter and heavier than that. The final judgment in Tuck v. Dellwood, issued by Judge Sandra Voss in March of 2020, awarded Raymond Earl Tuck $847,000 in damages, covering demolition costs, surveying fees, the value of the destroyed landscaping, assessed by a horticultural expert at $94,000, accounting for the age and significance of the plantings, attorney's fees, and punitive damages. The court also ordered Marcus Dellwood to pay the $2.1 million demolition and remediation costs from his own LLC. Total financial exposure, $2,947,000. Plus the TBI case, which was still coming. After the crews left that November evening, Pinecroft Road was quiet. The strip where the wall had stood was raw concrete rubble, cleared to the foundation, the soil beneath it compacted and gray. A temporary orange construction fence marked the boundary. Raymond's land, his again, formally and finally, looked like a wound. It would heal. That's the thing about land, it heals. Marcus Dellwood didn't come outside again that day. Over the following weeks, the Range Rover appeared in the driveway less and less. The Tesla was gone entirely by December. Brittany had taken it back to her parents' house in Brentwood, along with their 7-year-old daughter, Maddie. The neighbors on Pinecroft Road were not unkind about it, but they were not sorry. On a Thursday evening in late December, a moving truck arrived at Lot 12. It was a smaller truck than the one that had come in May. It sat in the driveway for most of the afternoon while 2 men carried boxes out of the house. Nobody went over to help. Nobody stood on their porch to watch either, not making a show of it, not rubbing it in. The people of Creston Falls are not that kind of people. When the truck pulled out at dusk, it was just gone. Raymond was in his wood shop. In April of 2021, Marcus Allen Dellwood was indicted on 3 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of unlawful conversion of investor funds in connection with the Ridgemont Estates development. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts in a negotiated agreement in October of that year and was sentenced to 32 months in federal prison and ordered to make restitution of $1.1 million to the families who'd lost their deposits. Dellwood's Signature Developments was dissolved by the Tennessee Secretary of State in January of 2022. The house on Lot 12 went back to the bank in the spring of 2022. It sold at auction in August. The new owners were a retired couple from Chattanooga, Tom and Linda Ferris. Tom had spent 30 years as a high school football coach. Linda made quilts. Tom introduced himself to Raymond the first weekend they moved in. He brought a 6-pack of Tennessee whiskey, Chattanooga brand, and they sat on Raymond's porch for 2 hours and talked about football and woodworking and the way the creek sounds on summer nights. They are friends now, good ones. The strip of land along the eastern boundary was remediated in the spring of 2020, the rubble hauled away, the soil broken up and amended with compost, the ground regraded to its original contour. Raymond had a landscape contractor from Knoxville come out and advise him on restoration. That June he planted black-eyed Susans. Not just along the front fence. Along the whole eastern boundary, all 32 feet of it, the full length, a long golden line of them running from the road to the creek. By August they were blooming. He sat on the back porch one evening that summer and looked at them in the low, golden light, and he said something to himself quietly that nobody heard. You know what I think he said? I think he said, "There you are, Caroline. Now let me ask you one last thing before we close out today. What does a 1971 survey document actually mean?" I'll tell you what it means. It means a man, a licensed surveyor named Thomas H. Briggs, who went out to a hillside in Harlan County, Tennessee, in the summer of 1971 with a transit and a chain and a notebook, told the truth. He measured exactly what was there. He drove stakes in exactly the right places. He signed his name. And 50 years later, that truth held. It didn't care about money. It didn't care about Range Rovers or Instagram followers or LLC filings. It didn't care about who had the bigger house or the louder lawyer. It just sat in a manila folder in a fireproof lockbox on the top shelf of a woodshop in Tennessee, waiting for a man patient enough to let it do its job. You see, folks, Raymond Tuck never needed to win a fight. He just needed to be right. And he knew the way men who have served know, the way men who have lost people know, the way men who have been tested know, that being right is a thing worth being patient about. The wall cost Marcus Dellwood nearly $3 million. The patience cost Raymond Tuck nothing he wasn't willing to spend. There's a lesson in that, several of them actually. But if I had to pick just one, the one that Raymond might put into words if you asked him on his porch on a summer evening with the black-eyed Susans blooming and the creek running soft behind the trees, I think it would be this. Never mistake a quiet man for a weak man, never mistake patience for permission, and never ever build a wall on land that isn't yours because somewhere in a fireproof lockbox there is a document with your name on it, and it will outlast you. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own property, your own patience, your own neighbors, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've got a story of your own, drop it in the comments. We read every one. Take care of yourselves out there, and we'll see you next time. This story is inspired by real events and public court records. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed or dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental.